All right, assistants and culinary instructors, it's Chef Jeff again, and I want to show you in this video things that are the way we teach the biscuit method in class. These again are the points that I want you to know, so that when you go to the table, you're able to help somebody at their station accomplish this during the prep round in class. So the biscuit method, we use it for making biscuits, of course, which we're going to make today. But I'll use most of this method if we're making a pie dough or an empanada dough or some sort of soft dough. This is typically it can be leavened dough, meaning it's leavened with baking powder or baking soda. Most likely this is not a yeast dough. This would be a soft dough. We want our biscuits to be soft and flaky. You want your pie crust to be soft and flaky, and your empanada doughs, or our tart dough. All of those fall into this method. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to follow the recipe. On this particular recipe for the biscuits, where we're going to add our flours together. So it doesn't matter what flours we're using. Of course it does for this recipe, but the method is what I want you to see. So this particular recipe has flour and sugar and salt and baking powder and baking soda, and all that's going to go in, and I'm going to mix it. Most recipes will have some sort of salt or something in it, so you want to have that mixed. The next thing is this is how I teach it in class to our customers. I say, hey, well, we're going to get ready to cut the butter in. So when you cut the butter in, you want to put your hands up like this, and we just use your thumbs. And the reason why we just use our thumbs like this is because if you start using your fingers with it, you start to squeeze the flour together, and when you squeeze the flour together, you start to develop gluten. And we want these doughs to be really soft. So the least amount of gluten development, the better. And so if you start squeezing, so basically gluten development happens when you add moisture to the dough. We're going to add butter to it in just a second. When you add moisture to the dough, and then you start to squeeze it, the proteins bind together, causing gluten strands. And the more you work them, the stronger and stronger they get. That's good for pizza dough. It's good for pasta dough. It's not good for biscuit doughs or tart doughs, any soft dough. So that's why we go like this. We do it with your fingers up, and I teach them that. And I have everyone at the table do this. I say, put your hands up, and we do this together. Because if you start turning your hands over, people naturally do this, and especially if they turn their hands this way, then they're squeezing the dough, making it a lot more, making it more glutinous, and it'll make it rock hard, and that's not what we want. So here we're going to take our butter. This is how we cut dough, how we cut the butter into the dough. You put the butter in, and you sift with your fingers, and then you press and flake. Press and flake, and drop the flakes into the flour. Go here, press and flake, press and flake. And what we're looking for are flakes like that. That's a good flake. The flakes need to be big. And every time you have two flakes stacked on top, if they're covered in flour and they stack on top of each other, that creates the flaky dough. So that's why we use your fingers to sift, find the butter, flake, and push the flakes off into the flour. Gently mix them, get them covered, flake. And I always tell everybody, the hardest thing to do is to stop. People think they have to keep going, but big flakes are like this are okay. Like that's okay. Because if you go too far, you're going to get pebble-sized pieces of butter, and that will create a mealy dough. It won't be the same. So I am flaked. I don't have any other big chunks. And then if you have time, you can go back and show them that you can flatten all the flakes, like that. When you flatten all the flakes, see there's a flake, you can flatten it. It makes it even flakier. So that is done. The next part that we do is what's called the half method. And I use this in a lot of doughs as well. The half method is a way to control the liquid, to get this part right and control the liquid. So in the half method, you're not allowed to use any thumbs. Thumbs are not allowed. So you're gonna use just your fingers. You teach them to scrape the side of the bowl, get the fingers to the bottom, and toss it. Toss it. Right? So that's how they do it. Right? So they toss it. See my fingers overlap, they touch. And so here's the actual method then. You take half of the liquid. This is great because it doesn't matter how big or small of a batch you're making. You just take half of the liquid and you toss, 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 toss until that liquid is absorbed. And then once it's absorbed, you usually can't stay at the table the whole time. And I'm actually in a demonstration with a table. They're doing all of this. I might show them one little piece of butter and then they do it. And every time I demonstrate this, I actually tell them to flake the butter, and I show them how to flake, and then I say, when you get done flaking, call me, and I come back. So here I am, I come back, and I show them how to do the half method, adding the liquid, and I show them just a little bit, and then they do it. So I kind of do this first one, and then if you come in real close, I say, all right, so here's what it looks like now. There's some wet and there's some dry pieces in there. So I take one little piece like this, and if you squeeze it a little bit, it'll start to get more wet, and I want to show them the end result. So now I say, all right, it should be completely hydrated, no dry pieces, and if it has a little bit of shine on it, that's okay. All right? So that's a big difference from this, where you see dry bits in the middle, and this one's hydrated with a little bit of shine. So I take that and I put it right there and I say, that's what you're looking for. And then I'll leave the table and let them go and let them do it. Again, the goal is for them to do the work. You're just the guide. So I've done the half method. The other important part I talk about with the half method is it's important to get the dough right. We want to get the dough in here to the right stage. And it doesn't matter if you use all the liquid or if you have some left over, because that's why we do this, to control the liquid, to get the dough right. And earlier today, just for example, we made biscuits, and we all had some liquid left over, meaning either the liquid was mismeasured, the flour was mismeasured, or it was just very humid, and so the flour already had a lot of moisture in it from humidity. So if you look in this bowl, you'll see that I've got still have some dry stuff, and it's really close. There's a little bit of dry bits, and there's some wet. So that means I might just need to drizzle a little bit, and a drizzle. Doesn't take very much when you get to the end. That little drizzle made it just right. There is almost maybe one or two little more mixes. So the dough has no dry pieces, and this one is a little bit sticky still. Probably added just a little bit too much liquid. So the goal of this one, the biscuits themselves tend to be a little stickier, but a tart dough or a pie dough would be a touch drier than this one. From this point, if I'm making biscuits, then I'm going to take this to the table, just as actually most tart doughs we take to the table as well. But that's typically in a different stage of the class. So I'm going to take my gloves off, and that's pretty much what we teach during the prep round of a class, and then the rest of it will happen most likely in a live demo from the instructor up here for everybody.